Howdy, and welcome back to the Ineligibles podcast. My name is Will Stone. His name is Chase Caldwell, and this is season 3 of the Ineligibles. Thank you guys so much for 2 incredible years on this podcast journey. We had no idea what we were doing when we got started, and you know we've learned a lot on the way. We've gotten more support from you guys than we ever expected. So thank you, and yeah, let's make season 3 our best year yet.
It's got to be right. Now we can say that we worked out all the kinks, but surely we don't have any at this point. Um, I want to echo what you said. Thank you for those of you who have listened to us for 2 years for some reason. We very much appreciate it. I very much appreciate it, and my mom really appreciates it. She's always so happy whenever we record an episode. So no, I'm looking forward to a strong season 3. I think we have a lot of good content coming your way over the next little bit. A lot of good news, and it seems like I don't know, maybe this is just like a seasonal thing, but we've got some news for season 3, and it seems like in season 2 we kicked off with big news too, didn't we? So might as well just keep that theme going, right?
Yeah. So season 3, if you're watching us on video on any of the video platforms that we're on, you might notice that there's a change in our logo, in our layout on our video deal here. No more DraftKings or TPPN or anything else, but instead is the Good Bull Hunting logo, which is the Texas A&M SB Nation site. It's run by our good friend Robert Behrens, who's been on this podcast. And a few months ago, we reached out to Robert and said, "Hey, uh, we feel like we have a really good rapport with you guys, and it would be mutually beneficial to kind of join forces." So yeah, here we are. We there's not too much changing overall, but definitely more appearances from Robert and maybe some other GBH folks in the future.
I
And
think that I think that's really what we can expect. The biggest change is that
yeah, I think
maybe we'll
so.
have more of a more what's the word, new blood in here from time to time.
Yeah,
Get new people in, and new points of views and all that, to where you don't get bogged down by just hearing me and Will talk about it all day long.
yeah.
And
You're
then
probably sick of us
instead
by
you
now.
start to get some differings of opinions. Maybe people will be excited when we lose instead of crying a river. But no, I really looking forward to that. Love the guys over there. Jay's one of my best buddies from back when we were in on the team together. If you could, I don't know how to say that without making it sound like I was on the football team. Was not on the football team. I was the ball boy. So, uh, but Jay was one of my good buddies. Robert and I have a great rapport with our love for equipment. So, um, yeah, I love those guys, and looking forward to having more of them on the podcast, and looking forward to more of your insight, Will, on text. I don't know what the people call that whenever you have a
Yeah,
blog post, but if you haven't seen, Will put out his first article for them the other day, and it's fantastic. You need to go check it out.
thank you. Yes. As Chase was saying earlier, if you may be sick of us, in case you're not sick of me in particular, I will be doing some written content on Good Bull Hunting. They were nice enough to uh, allow me to be on their platform, and I submitted my first article last week that went live on Friday, and just kind of it was like an off-season report card, and I bet we get into a lot of those topics in this episode. But if we miss anything, definitely go check that out. And I don't really have uh, a plan or like we talked about the other day, a content calendar on what I'm even going to be, like how often. Like I've got an idea of the things I want to talk about, but I was like this week I was like, should I write something else? Like I haven't really, I haven't gotten that far, but there's 51 days until we kick off against New Mexico. So between now and then, plenty of time to kind of head out, and there's much more to come. So more and better content here on the podcast, more content on in blog form at goodbullhunting.com. So yeah, that's how we're kicking off season 3. We always do it big. We always do something new, and that's our announcement for this season.
Big things. Well, we're definitely excited about this partnership. Wonderful group of guys. Wonderful name to be associated with, and we're very honored to be in that position. And if there's anybody deserving of it, it's Will here. He is very good at the written word, and I think will be extremely good on that platform to be able to just explain some of the things that you like to get out there in blog form. So I'm less of a writer. If you can't tell, I'm a talker. If you're friends with me, then you know that I will call you 10 times before I send you a text message, and that's just the way I am. So you'll just hear me. You won't see my text, but from time to time you might just see that I like to message on goodbullhunting.com. So
there we
well,
go.
but in standard new season fashion, I guess we should say, I think the main focus today is going to be on the state of the program. So let's get after it, Will.
Yeah, so going back to when we very first launched the Ineligibles, we put out like a little, I guess, not interview, but like a who we are kind of episode. But after that was our state of the program. Like our first real episode was state of the program, and at that time we felt pretty good. We were coming off of it was after the COVID season. We were 9-1, won the Orange Bowl. Things were looking up, just kind of all around. I'd say we were probably at like a 9, on a scale of 1 to 10. Last season, on the state of the program, we were at like a 15. It was, well, last year we weren't good because we lost our quarterback, and we just signed the best class in the history of recruiting. They're all here. They're all awesome. We're probably going to win minimum 10 games this year and then be the favorite for the national title in 2023.
What could possibly go wrong?
Our expectations were so moderate and reasonable. Well, if you've found this show by chance, that was not the case. Kind of an implosion of sorts last year. Some injuries, some youth, some dysfunction. Multiple quarterbacks, took snaps. It was just a year to get all of your bad things out. We even said that we were like, hey, let's use up all of our bad luck on this year. Like it's already in the tank. Like let's just get it all out. And I think we did that. I feel like we had 30 players miss a game with the flu. I mean, it doesn't get any worse than that. So, yeah, that's if you were to put a number, 1 to 10 on, like we started out pretty high, we went even higher. We've come back down to earth for sure. I'd probably say like a 7.5,
like a 6, 7, yeah,
yeah,
somewhere in there.
I would say 6. But what's been encouraging is the ability of this coaching staff to keep the recruiting trail hot. Like, and we don't have to get into the specifics, but it's hard to sell a 5-7 season, and they got that great class in 22. They had a solid class last year. I figured that, and most of the high end players are going to be in wait and see mode, and even the guys you have committed, you can't go out there and go 5-7 again. So,
for sure,
that's paramount. But to put in the effort and kind of turn things around on that front, they've been doing outstanding work on the recruiting trail. I know that has no bearing on this season, but from a program standpoint, that's it feels good. Like it's a good look to say, hey, if we can salvage this year and turn in a 9-win, 10-win season, the recruiting's kind of already there, and maybe a good season on the field will even push it over the top a little bit more. So that's kind of brought me up a little bit, but it's it's all depend. Like this season is so pivotal. I mean, I'm not probably since 2017 when we knew it was kind of do or die for Kevin Sumlin. This feels more similar to that than anything else that we've seen since then.
Yeah, I think yeah, I agree with that, but at the same time, I think we've had some growing pains. We've really, if you stop and think about the tenure of Jimbo, it's been a lot of weird, just a lot of weird, and I don't want to make excuses for that because every team had a COVID year, right? Um, Everybody has been dealing with the extended red shirts or the extended eligibility for, I don't know, you can stay for 8 years or however long. Um, Everybody's been dealing with that, not just us. Uh, but with the kickoff of NIL and everything like that, it's hard for me to even compare this to where someone was at the end of his tenure, strictly because it's it hadn't seemed to be just kind of falling off. The wheels are falling off. It never has seemed like that.
Yeah,
Instead, it seemed to be more of a roller coaster of highs and lows at the same time. And I feel like there at the last 2 or 3 years of Sumlin, there wasn't very many highs. Like
yeah.
the recruiting fell off, everything kind of fell off, and like you said, sure, recruiting isn't going to necessarily help us this year, but the fact that it's still high, that's a good thing.
Exactly.
And so I agree with you in the context of like Jimbo's feet's going to be held to the fire a lot more this year than ever before. Um, but I think that I don't think that all bets are off if we have an 8-4 or even 9-3 season this year. I don't think that that will be the end of Jimbo, if that
Oh
makes
yeah.
sense.
Or even if we went 7-5, or
Yeah.
was it? I'm trying to even remember what the record was. Was our record 6-6 in someone's last year? Or was it 7-5?
It was 7-5.
Okay, so like even if after that, like we fired him, and I would go out on a limb and say that Jimbo is not getting fired at 7-5. I just don't. I wouldn't buy into that. 5-7, 4-8. I could see it, yeah, but I'm not expecting that whatsoever. But and I do want to be clear because those are two very different situations. That 2017 team was probably the least talented roster that someone had his entire
Mhm.
tenure. This is probably the most talented roster that Jimbo's had his entire tenure. Like,
Well, and that's a that is a really you're right on the money with that, right? That towards the end of someone's tenure, the teams on paper fell off, right?
right?
Jimbo had the the worst year with the best team on paper in Texas A&M history. So that was his worst year, and so it's highs and lows. It's not all as one thing, you know.
Yeah, but yeah. So if I feel like going into that 2017 year, it was pretty obvious. It was like, hey, we're either going to win, 9 or 10 games, or this thing's over and we're going to start from scratch. But you could kind of already tell, you know, it was after, like you didn't have Miles Garrett anymore.
Mhm.
All those amazing offensive linemen from Sherman's, classes, all those guys were gone. It was just kind of like you were counting on a true freshman and a redshirt freshman at quarterback. Neither one had any really experience, and Starkle gets hurt the first game, and yeah, Travion, he was great that year, but not much else was really going well for us
Yeah.
on as far as the roster goes. But this is totally different. Like it's loaded at defensive line and receiver, and You feel pretty good about quarterback. The O line is there's a path towards a good unit on the O line. Uh, at the starting level, the linebackers and secondary looks awesome. So, um, and you have some depth. Like there's not depth at every position, but it's a pretty deep team. And I don't know. I don't want to go too long on that, but it is a different situation, and but that's kind of why we have the expectations that we do.
Mhm.
If we were sitting there seeing like watching the roster deteriorate and be like, oh, well, if they win 10 games, they can save it, but that's never going to happen. Like
Yeah.
that is well within the realm of possibility. Especially when you look at the SEC, it's you know you don't play Georgia in the regular season, and the rest of your schedule is pretty wide open. The Like some of the top teams have turned over their quarterbacks, with Alabama and Tennessee. LSU has two good ones. A lot of folks are picking them to win the West, but when you look at the conference and look around the country, and we'll get into this in future shows, but it truly is wide open. I mean, we're not going to sit here and call for well, A&M, they can still get in the playoff. We have a long, long way to go until we even can entertain those ideas. But there's at the end of last season, I was at like a 4,
Mhm.
like a 3 or 4. I'm like, man, I'm so in the dumps. Changes have to be made, and you know, to briefly kind of give you the highlights of that article I wrote. It's what we said on this podcast back in November. It was, hey, there's 3 things that they can do to keep this from cratering. It's keep your best players. If God forbid, if Connor Wigman or Evan Stewart had transferred, I have no optimism. Like
Yeah.
it's over. Like especially Connor. Like if you're heir apparent, future star quarterback, if he had left, then yeah, you could have put a fork in the program. But they accomplished that. They held on to their core guys.
Mhm.
Didn't lose any starters to the portal. Just 3 guys to the NFL. They actually used the portal this offseason. They took 1 transfer last year. They took 10 this year. And then the biggest thing of all was make changes on offense. And we can sit here and we think they've made changes. Like they brought in Petrino to run the offense. All signs pointing towards, I should say, all signs point towards that being the case.
Yeah.
But as I ended that article with, we're not going to know anything until games start being played. Like
Yeah.
until we see the offense with our own eyes and see, hey, this is functional, this is much improved and efficient. We're not going to know, but that's really the ultimate key to this whole thing.
Yeah, and I think not to point. I don't like to make comparisons that make it seem as if I'm um, some conspiracy theorist or oh, this happened, so that happened. But I talked several times about how TCU went 5-7, and then the next year they're in the playoff. Um, and that was I draw that comparison just to show in the modern age with the transfer portal and with everything, there's a lot of opportunity to jump right back up. To have these ebb and flow seasons instead of it being a very consistent 8-4, 9-3. Like you don't have to have 4 8-4 seasons, then 3 9-3 seasons, then 2 10-2 seasons, then 1 11-1 season to finally have a 12-0 season. That it doesn't work that way. I don't think it ever has worked that way.
No.
But it's even to me, it just seems like in the last probably 20 years of college football, it's gotten to where with recruiting and all these swings that we have, it's easier to have big swings like this. And whenever you consider that we're in the SEC, games are a lot harder to win. They're you really got to earn them. It's easier for those big swings to happen to teams, not just to A&M, but to teams, because with college football, especially how it's been with only 4 teams going to the playoff, you're in a place where you get to 2 losses and your season's pretty much over.
Yeah.
And so if you it's really hard to keep a team, especially a very talented team of a bunch of freshman 5-star recruits. It's really hard to keep them focused when you hit your third loss.
Yeah.
It just becomes a who cares? Next season, whatever. I'm gonna save my body. I'm gonna take care of myself, and
Yeah.
and it becomes individualized. And I'm not pointing any fingers at any players in particular. I'm just saying that that's the modern challenges that we deal with. Um, but to put a shine of hope over this program, right? And to really give some optimism for this coming year. You look at a lot of the wins that we had last year, and they were real close. They could have been losses, but you look at a lot of losses, and they were real close. They could have
Yeah.
been wins. It's really easy for us to look at a 5-7 season and be like, man, that was terrible,
Yeah.
and forget that we lost to Bama on the 2-yard line. And it's easy to forget about those games that were, a touchdown or field goal away from winning, that we had it, we just couldn't quite finish. And I'm not trying to say that those should be, what's the word, the
Like
it,
like it shouldn't count.
yeah, like some people, oh well, just because it's close, you can't say, oh, it was close. And I'm not trying to necessarily say that. I am saying that to some degree though, because it's a game of inches, right?
Yeah.
And if you're only inches away, that then shows you're 5-7. But if you can figure out how to get 3 more inches next time, then, well, you may end up flipping the script. You may end up a 9 and
Yeah.
3, 10 and 2, 11 and 1 team. And so to say that the you know contending for a playoff or anything like that's out of the realm of possibility, I don't think is true. I think we absolutely have the potential to be able to do that this year, but we've got to see some improvement to where we win those games of inches, and instead of being on the other side of
Yeah.
it.
And you have to use that context, like that goes into the whole. You can't like I used to like the quote from Bill Parcells where he says like a a, a team is or is, I think the quote was you are what your record says you are,
Hmm.
and you know in the NFL maybe, but actually I wouldn't even go that far, but I just don't like that quote at all, like because it doesn't show, you know, like in Jimbo's first year, a narrow loss to Clemson, like it goes down as a loss, but to kind of bring some, advanced stats into this, A&M had a 60% chance of winning that game. So
Hmm.
when you look at a whole season, you can't just look at, wins and losses, or else you'd say there's no way that TCU can go from 5-7 to 14-2 or whatever they were last year,
Yeah.
and look at them. Like, I don't think they got blown out a bunch in their 5-7 season. And last year they really didn't blow anybody out. They won a bunch of really tight games, but they found ways to, you know, get that extra yard, go that extra step, and they won all those close games. And then, they got in the playoffs and they won a close game in the playoffs. I mean,
Hmm.
we haven't even been to the playoffs yet. So it's that context is important. You can't just say, "Oh, well, they lost 7 games last year, and it was just a horrible year." Yeah, it was horrible, but we didn't get blown out every single week. There's a couple in there that got away from us, but even with a quarterback that we had benched and a hurt offensive line, we almost beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa. I
Yeah.
mean, there's you have to have that context. You can't just say, "Hey, well, they were 5-7 last year. There's no way that they can improve that much in one year."
Well, I think, like, I love statistics. I know that you probably love them even more than I do. And really, any sports fan that you meet, they're going to be really into statistics. It always seems like, and that's what we as sports fans do, is try to drill everything down into statistics. You get the first like 2 or 3 games of the season, and everybody talks about how good you are based on how many yards you got. We have
Yeah.
Kenny Trill, putting up 585 yards against South
Breaking records in his
Carolina, and
first start.
look at how great we are because we put up 585 yards. Okay, but then what happens, right? But then you get into game 4, 5, 6, 7, in that middle of the season, and now the focus starts to be how big of a win did you have against people instead of how many yards you got. Now it's how many points you got, and then once you get towards the end of the season, it's, well, what's your record? And so it's constantly a drill down of us trying to simplify and simplify and simplify the sport instead of focusing on the fact that you got 85 or really 105 plus human beings on this team. And you think about, like, I think we oftentimes forget about the fact that there's human beings out there making those plays. And that's why I love college football, is because you got, a future Hall of Famer on one side going up against a future accountant. Like,
Yeah.
I love that idea, but the Hall of Famer is going to make mistakes too,
Oh
and
yeah.
the accountant's going to make plenty of mistakes too. And so, like, the misalignments and things being wrong, that'll happen to every team every year at every position. I mean, that is a constant thing. Motivation is a big thing, and how to keep guys motivated. And all of these are metrics that you can't measure,
Mhm.
at least not statistically speaking. And so, but that's what makes that difference. That's why everybody has that underdog that they root for, and everybody likes those little schools more than they do the Alabamas and Ohio States of the world, because they want to see that go, because it's a 300 story, right? It's
Right.
here are the 300 versus all these thousands of soldiers, and that somehow they won, the David and Goliaths of the world. Like, that's what we crave. Why? Because statistically it's not possible, but somehow the humans made it happen.
Yeah.
And so that's where, um I don't know. I mean, you can't ever judge that, and especially from the outside looking in, no way we could say that. We could paint
Yeah.
every picture about our program and that these guys are motivated, but the Texas players, they're all ready to get out of there, and then a Texas fan will say exactly the opposite,
Yeah.
because you have no idea. So it would be stupid to make those comparisons, I would say, where we can really only talk statistics. But at the end of the day, the possibilities really come from the human beings making these errors or making these plays. And both teams make plays each game. There's both sides. All players are going to make some sort of play, whether it's a good play or a bad play. And so you can't you could be a great team, but if the other team makes good plays against you, they can beat you.
Yeah.
And so,
Also,
uh,
you may just be unlucky that day. Like
and you might, yeah, but
you might fumble the ball on your own side of the field and and give them an easy score. I mean,
yeah,
there's a handful of plays that can turn a game, and uh, like unless you're just really dominating the other team on a down to down basis, uh, it can come down to a couple plays, and you can't make those mistakes.
yeah. And so I think that's the focus that, hopefully last year was a bit of a teaching tool, for especially some of the younger guys that might not have as much experience on our team, of how this game really is a game of inches.
Yeah,
Here we are, we had a 5-7, year, but we almost beat Alabama. We came down to one play, and if he'd have caught the ball, it would have been a whole different ball game.
yeah,
Or if we'd have run the ball, heaven forbid. But that's what it comes down to. Hopefully, I mean, you would hope as a fan that the coaches learned something, that the players learned something, that the team as a whole came together and learned those lessons. But whether they did or not, there's no way for us to really speculate on that.
yeah,
But if I'm watching film of last year and I'm watching those things, that's what I begin to draw from, is look how, if we would have focused on these little things, if maybe we would have gotten this first down in the first quarter, this would have been a whole different ball game, and we wouldn't have lost this game. So that comes down to, oh, look at that dumb penalty that we shouldn't have had. It's playing your position better, and really focusing on the small things and letting the small things turn into big things.
Yeah. There's one thing you said in there that I really want to kind of expand on, and that's there's there's some things you can measure and some things you can't measure. So, like for example, you can't really measure a team's culture or a program's culture.
Hmm.
Like there's no metric for that. Like it's just kind of either it is or it isn't, type of thing. Last year, I don't think our culture was very solid. I think there was maybe some, you know, not to name any names. If you're an A&M fan, you probably already know the names, but there's some character concerns or maybe uh, some some presence in the locker room that wasn't maybe ideal for success. I feel that we lost 27 guys. They weren't all bad. Like I'm not saying we cleaned house and got rid of all the
Yeah.
all the
All
bad
the
guys.
troublemakers. Yeah,
Yeah,
no, it's not
but
that at all.
there was significant turnover, and I think a lot of the guys, or the majority of the guys that stayed, are the ones that are bought in.
Hmm.
All the freshmen that stay, we lost, I don't know, maybe 6 freshmen from that really stud class. But you kept Connor Wigman, you kept Evan Stewart, Bryce Anderson, Cam Dewberry, Donovan Green. That really core group of them that are emerging as leaders. Uh, One of those guys is probably your starting quarterback. I think Bryce may be the quarterback of the defense this year. But those guys are bought in. It sounds like that class is really taking it taking the aspect of leadership on itself, and you can't expect a bunch of 18-year-olds to come in here as true freshmen and just like, well, this is our show now, we're going to run it and we set the standard and blah blah blah. Like you know it doesn't matter how good you are, you can't come into a program brand new out of high school and you know kind of and do things that way. It took them being in for a year, you know, getting playing time, seeing how it was done, and now it's their turn to step up and be leaders. And I think at least I hope, and from what I've heard, I think it's the case that the leadership and the culture of the locker room is much improved from last season.
Yeah, and you would, like you said, you hope that's what you would hope would happen. I definitely hope that has happened. I think all this does boil down to those immeasurables, things that you can't quite put a finger on. I think when you're talking culture of a program, in some respects, you can only really gauge culture as a lagging indicator and not a leading. It's one
That's
that
fair.
once the season is over, then you could look back and be like, yeah, I feel like we had a culture problem, or oh, I think that team was really tight knit. You think of 2012, and how it just seemed like everybody was just tied in and all of that, and
Perfect storm.
it just worked. It was a good team, and everybody was bought in. But was there times throughout 2012 that we didn't feel that way going into the games? Absolutely. But then when you look back on it, now it's this perfect little, ESPN 30 for 30 or whatever that you want to explain of, like, oh yeah, here's this great season. I think the COVID season for us was the same way. Like, here's these guys that probably had to spend a ton of time together, even more so than normal, under weird circumstances. And it's going to make or break your team. And I think a lot of teams that broke their team and a lot of teams that made their team, and for us specifically, I think it made us. But you get a whole bunch of, I think this is all speculation here. Okay. This isn't me saying that this is 100% the way it was. And maybe I'm dead wrong. Maybe none of this happened. But logically speaking, let's think about bringing on the number one recruiting class in the history of college football recruiting in the modern age to a school that hadn't been to a national championship since 1939. They're coming in. That's the blessing and curse, I guess, of the recruiting circles is you're recruiting these guys saying, Jimbo has said it a couple times, and he'll say it more eloquently than I could. But do you want to be one of the guys that did it, or do you want to be the first that did it, right? And so that's a really good recruiting pitch, and I love that recruiting pitch because it I would be all about that if I was in their shoes. That would sound really good to me until you get them on campus. And then now when they're on campus, you're like, hey, listen to the seniors, listen to the juniors, listen to these guys. They're experienced in the program. They're your leaders. They're the ones you need to follow. You're not going to step right in day one and change the game. Well, hold on. Didn't you tell me that's why you wanted me to come to your school? Was so that I would change the game for you guys. And now whenever I'm here, you're telling me that I'm supposed to just fall in line, and so it's a blessing and a curse, I would think, of that recruiting pitch to say, yeah, you'll be the first to ever do it, but follow our steps on how to get there, even though we've never been there, right? And so, I mean, obviously Jimbo has, and so there's kind of that of like, hey, if you follow my lead, we can be the first to do it at A&M. But that's not going to resonate with all of them. There's a lot of 17-year-old kids out there that all they're going to hear is, I'm the best. Texas A&M can't win unless I'm there. And that's just the reality of it.
Yeah.
And like I said about culture being a lagging indicator, you don't know how that team is going to mesh together until they've already meshed.
Right.
It's like you get to December, and then you can say whether the team really was a good team together or they weren't. You can't figure that out in August. I mean, you can really push them and say, hey, y'all need to draw closer together. Y'all need to draw closer together. But if they're not, I mean, you won't really figure that out until it's already been done. And
Yeah.
so it's I would like to think that a lot of the guys that stayed back would be guys that learned those lessons of, hey, yeah, we're not all that in a bag of chips. We got to figure out how to win these games of inches. We're not just going to be able to win it overall just by doing what we always did in high school. Now we're going to have to fight for every inch,
Yeah.
and if they can make that change, well then, yeah, you might see a big development in terms of finishing games.
Yeah. And I think, another thing that kind of goes along with that you can't measure is if you were going to have a bad season, as bad as last year season was, maybe it was a good thing for, like, if it was going to happen anyway, for it to happen to that group of freshmen that are so talented. And,
Mm-hmm.
They got, a cold dose of reality to where, and obviously it wasn't just their fault. Like, I'm not saying that at all, but they got, a kind of a wake up call, like, hey, this sucks. Like, losing games sucks.
Yeah.
And we just lost 7 of them. And I don't want to ever feel that way ever again. And, I was watching Hard Knocks last year, and the Lions had been god awful 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And they were on Hard Knocks this past year. Shout out to Dan Campbell, former A&M tight end. But they had a running back, Jamal Williams, who's a great dude, fantastic guy to hear in an interview. But he was like, doing the breakout at the end of practice, and he was just going on. He was like, "Do y'all know how embarrassing last year was when we lost like 11 games in a row?" He's like, "That made me sick to my stomach, and like, if I can help it, that's never going to happen, to a team that I'm on ever again." And I feel like that kind of, uh, like we said, you can't measure that, but I have to imagine that that was a pretty crappy feeling to go through that. And, you know, I'm sure they're not reading all the negative stuff that we see, on social media, but I bet they've read some of it, and I'm sure they don't like it. It's probably a pretty good motivator to go out there and turn things around.
Yeah, and I mean to continue along with this theme, it it goes back to the fact that they're humans.
Yeah.
Some people can really deal with um, loss or any kind of travesty They can deal with their embarrassments, pains, things like that, and use that as a motivator, and it makes them better. Um, Other people, it really drags them down, and they can't get it out of their head. And football players are no different. I mean, that's they're still humans, you know. And they are. I mean, think about Will, for a second. Think about your sophomore year of college. Okay, is there anything that you did during that year that you look at now that you're thinking like, I cannot believe that I did that?
Yeah, it wouldn't be something I would say on here,
Yeah.
but
Oh,
yeah,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, just period. Like you look at it and you're like, man, I can't believe I did that. That was so stupid. I mean,
yeah,
I did stuff like last week that I look back on. And I was like, man, I can't believe I did that. I was so stupid back then.
yeah,
And like that's just the reality. But when you're 19 years old, you do a lot of stupid stuff, and outside of just stupid stuff, I mean like mental errors, just ways that you cope with things. Now, as a 30-year-old, when I'm faced with obstacles, I face it a lot differently than I did 10 years ago when I was 20.
yeah,
And I might be more level-headed. I might be more, able to cope with those things. As a 20-year-old, I wasn't. And a lot of these guys that we're talking about, especially the guys that transferred and or that were part of that big class, um, they're 18-year-old kids and they're on top of the world. They had more fame coming out of high school than me and you will ever have.
yeah,
Like that's just the way that it is. That's how the cookie crumbles. So those guys, there's going to be plenty of them that don't know how to cope with that. There's going to be plenty of them who come out of school, they're on top of the world. Everybody's been telling them they're great. They're now dealing with, maybe some hardship where they're not starting or they're dealing with problems and they're trying to figure out how to cope with it. They're an 18-year-old kid, and everybody that's in their circle is just trying to make sure that they get to the NFL so that maybe they can retire at 45, because
yeah,
my nephew made it to the NFL and he bought me a house. Like that there's some people, a lot of these guys that they're in those moments where there's so many people depending on them to be successful
yeah,
that they have to do it right now. They can't wait to 2 or 3 years and see if it works. If it's not working right now, they need to figure something else out.
yeah,
And so I can't blame anybody that would transfer, that wouldn't buy into the program, and that's not what my point is. It's more of to say that these guys, they're still humans and they're still dealing with it. And I promise you, I'll always say this, but if we hate that we lost a game, I guarantee they hate it 10 times more than we could ever
yeah,
imagine.
absolutely,
Because their future depends on it. I
yeah,
mean, I think about how whenever I was starting my business and I'd meet with somebody and I thought that everything went great and then found out that they didn't want to work with me. Well, that was a hard pill to swallow. What did I do wrong? Could I have done better? And it's easy to beat yourself up about that. And
yeah,
so these guys that are 18, 19, 20 years old, they deal with the same things of, oh, and some of them get too bogged down, and then some of them don't really care. They say, oh well, if you'd have started me, then we would have won.
yeah,
And then they're not there to support the team. And so um yeah, it's humans, it's human beings, it's
yep,
105 plus, human beings that they're all going to have different emotions and different outlooks and different backgrounds, and that's all going to culminate. Will it culminate into a team that can accumulate wins? That you won't find out until the end of the year.
yep.
So,
Um, and to kind of drive that, well, actually, no, I'm not even going to do it because we talked about last season too much. But
yeah.
um, in short, to kind of sum all that up, I think a lot of the factors of last season that led to last season being so poor. I feel like the vast majority have been addressed.
Hmm.
I feel like you know, last year it was a combination of injuries, and I remember going into last year, we did our position previews. I thought, yeah, all these freshmen are really great, but they're not going to play. Our other guys are too good, and then all those other guys got hurt. I mean, McKinley Jackson missed the first 5 games. Fadil Diggs missed the last 4 or 5 games. Tumiche missed the whole season and then
Yeah.
transferred. It was just a mess. I mean, apparently, according to his mom that posted on TexAgs, the week of the first game, Trey Zune dislocated his kneecap and played all year with a busted knee. And it was just one thing after another. And, you know, should all of that have led to 5-7? No, there was obvious dysfunction on offense that what Jimbo wanted to run was not being processed or learned by the players. It's not their fault. I think Jimbo has come to realize, like, hey, my offense will not work at college anymore. It's not feasible. So, but the other aspect is, there were a bunch of 17 and 18-year-olds out there, or guys playing hurt, and that was not what we anticipated. And you just can't, like, no team, no Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama, any of them are playing 10 and 12 freshmen in a game. I mean, that's just it's unheard of. So, I think that part is fixed because all those guys got playing time and they stuck around. And then, fingers crossed that the change on offense is what the doctor ordered.
Yeah, and I think it will be to some degree. I'm still anxious to see what that looks like. And you said earlier that we won't know what it looks like until games start being played, but you really won't know what it looks like until about midway through the season. It's I like the whole setup that we have. I've said my piece about what I dislike about it. So let's roll with it. Let's now focus on what the good about it is. I think you said something just now that I think is the key to it, where Jimbo, like you said, these guys weren't learning Jimbo's offense, and maybe they were, or maybe they weren't. Maybe they were. Maybe they did know it through and through, but Jimbo's offense was just terrible. Maybe it didn't work. But no matter what the case may be, I started to feel last year as if Jimbo was letting his pride get in the way, because
Yeah.
I started to hear things from him such as, we're not executing. We had a good game plan and nobody executed it. Well, that to me says I'm a good coach. My players aren't that good.
Yeah.
And that when you get to that point, yeah, you're done, coach.
Yeah.
You need to be saying, hey, I know he has his little coach speak of, I got to coach him better. We've got to coach him better. That's our thing. Okay. But mean that.
Yeah.
If you start saying, hey, we're not executing, why aren't we executing if you're a good coach? Why are your players not executing? You've got to become a better coach. You've got to be a better coach for them. And I think in this case, it's just what the doctor ordered. The best way for you to be a good coach is to get out of the way. Get out of your players' way, let them blossom and do what they need to do, get a more modern offense going, and let's run with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think when you look at, when you watch us play offense last year, like, nothing looked like our team did not look confident at all. There was no confidence in what they were being asked to do. And they just made offense look really, really hard. You go look at any other team, like, oh, offense is super easy. All the rules are slanted towards the offense now. It's impossible to not have a good offense in 2022, 2023, unless you're Iowa or A&M for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, I've been digging into some tape here the past month or so. It's not hard. It's not easy to find Missouri State games on YouTube, but they are there. And you saw some of those things kind of spill over into the spring game, back in April. And at this point, it would really truly shock me if this is not Petrino, if it's not his his call on offense, if it's not him
Mhm.
installing, deciding what plays we're going to focus on, because I think that's the primary difference. Is I don't think their playbooks probably aren't that dissimilar, but Petrino can look at his roster and go, "Hey, this roster is going to be really good at these parts. Let's cut all that other crap out and just focus on this." Like, don't even put it in their head. It's too much information. Like, just focus on the stuff that you can be good at. So that's my hope. I'm fairly confident that's the case. If it's not, well, hold on to your butts because it may be a bumpy ride.
Well, and that's a good point because and that makes that gets me to what I always felt like was Jimbo's thing. I felt like he had a good offense, he had a good system, but I felt like it was a system that had to be run with high caliber players at every position,
Yeah.
really like a professional roster would be.
His
It's
2013 team had every starter get drafted.
yeah, and so if you have that kind of talent on a team and you're able to get them just constant, you know, that where there's at least one or two players at every position that knows that playbook so well that they're an expert at it and that they can later become coaches like a lot of them did. That would be the recipe for success there. And I feel like what Jimbo has done in the past is, hey, I'm going to start it. I want all you guys to start learning it. I'm going to start putting these pieces together. And
Yeah.
we're just going to run it and run it and run it. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. We're just going to keep doing it until it works, And if it's not working, that means that we need to recruit better at that position that's not working, and get new guys in there until we have good enough guys to where the whole system runs.
Yeah.
And in a way, I felt like we got kind of close to it operating at full caliber and all of that. And then that influx of guys coming in kind of made it seem okay. We've got all the players now, it should work. Well, you had a lot of players that didn't know the playbook at that point,
Yeah.
and so I just feel like that just we're still going to do it. We're still going to do it.
Hmm.
I felt a lot of times as if like Jimbo's just being way too stubborn here,
Yeah.
and it just to me, um, you know, it's not a game that you can be stubborn. It's one that you've got to make changes, and you got to edit as you go, especially in college. Now, NFL, I think you could probably be stubborn. You probably could just keep running your thing until your players get it, right? But
Yeah.
college, I feel like there's too much variation in terms of motivation for guys, in terms of, are these guys going to want to continue playing football after college, or, that kind of thing. Like there's too much variation that I think you got to kind of go with the flow sometimes, and that's where I think Petrino will do a much better job. Um, like you said, tailoring the offense to say, okay, these
Yeah.
parts don't work. I don't think Jimbo ever did that.
I don't
Um,
think so.
that's complete speculation. I don't know. I'm not an X's and O's guy. I can't tell you like what it all looked like, but to me, it just seemed as if he ain't cutting nothing out. It's
Yeah.
going to be this is how we run it, and that's how we run it. And don't even suggest cutting something out, or you'll be on the chopping block.
Yeah. It's very square peg round hole. It's like,
Yeah,
hey,
very much so.
like I'm the offense and you guys are gonna, like I dictate what we do and not, our personnel, which
Hmm.
is, you know, not the way to do it. And I think he's realized that by bringing in Petrino. Um, and you can kind of see that with some of Petrino's stuff, like the offense from like the core is always going to be there, but what he ran with Lamar Jackson and what he ran with Ryan Mallett, not the same offense.
Hmm.
Like there's a lot of different things in there that take advantage of those different players. But I think let's kind of close it out on maybe like a brief overview of just the roster in general. The next few episodes coming up is going to dive into each position group a little bit. I think we're definitely going to combine some. It's not going to be like this the quarterbacks episode, this the running backs episode. It's going to a lot of that's going to be combined into one episode. But um, you know, is there a few position groups where you feel like that this team is really really strong, or anything that maybe is lacking a little bit?
Hmm. That's a deep question. Um, I think I don't know. I would say for the most part, everything is pretty. I'd say I'd put our offense somewhere in the 60 to 70% confidence range, and put our defense more in like the 80 to 90% confidence range.
Yeah,
On defense, I think we really have the talent there at almost every position. And so I wouldn't necessarily say that there's weaknesses per se. It's just more of there's some things that we could identify as okay. Do we have enough depth here? Um, are the schemes going to work a little bit better this year than maybe they did last year? And can we execute with those guys on defense? Now on offense, I would say um, there's a lot of position. If you picked apart each individual position group, I would say almost the exact same thing about it. Of I think we should be better here. Well, save the running back, right? Because I loved A Chain. I still do. Wish him the most success. It's going to be really hard to replicate that. At the same time, I'm really excited about the running backs coming up. And I think with a more developed offensive line, they might they might end up putting up better numbers, not because necessarily that they're better running backs, but because A Chain didn't have as good of a line. In the same sense, I would say the same thing about the quarterback. I think we'll see a lot more success from our quarterback this year than we have in the past, simply because I think our offensive line is going to be much improved. And so that's, I would say, just about the exact same thing about every position on offense. I think we're going to be improved here, um, but in I'd say instead of drilling it down position by position, it's more as a whole. I think the
yeah,
unit as a whole will work better together, um, simply because of the talent and the little experience sprinkled in here, there, and otherwise. I
yeah,
think will be really good for us.
yeah. No, I'm right on board with that. I did see a picture of some of our defensive linemen today. Those dudes are ready to take the field. Uh, w- the D line episode is going to be a fun one. It always is. It always has been under Jimbo. That's one position that has had no drop off. Has just
Mhm.
kind of improved and improved. But that's it's a strong group, and I really hope that they can actually put that into into it's not production, it's like a business term, but like I wish that I want to see it, like I want to
Mhm.
see these big bodies stopping the run and just destroying opposing O lines. I
Yeah.
want to see guys like LT Overton and Fadil Diggs getting some more pass rush than we saw last year. And Fadil, he had like I think 5 sacks in 4 games, something like that, to end the year. He had 2 sacks against Alabama. He was really hitting his stride before he got injured. So having him back, Overton was supposed to be in high school last year. Now he's been in the program and should be ready to take on a bigger role.
Mhm.
All those guys are just it's so deep, but as great as that room is, the most exciting, especially in today's football, is this group of skill position guys. Like
Yeah.
I think when you finally have uh, when you finally have Anias healthy, you can put Anias, Evan, Moose, Noah Thomas, who everyone in the program is raving about Noah Thomas. They think he is going to absolutely break out this year. You got guys like Donovan Green, who looks outstanding, going into his second year. They took some transfer receivers. They got some young freshmen that look good, but and obviously the second and third string tight ends are pretty stout as well. So I'm looking forward to how, like, in the new offense, getting those guys the football. Like, get Evan the
Mhm.
football every way that you can, because the guy's just electric. It's the same with Anias. Anias may be a little more what we saw in 2020, where he's in the backfield, he's in the slot. He's
I
in
really hope
motion.
so, just for his own success. That guy
Yeah,
deserves a lot of success, and I hope that we can vault him to that platform this year.
yeah. So I think D line, I think the skill guys on offense, and honestly, and I think we'll probably start with quarterback next week. But there's been some discourse on Twitter this week about the quarterbacks in the SEC. Now, I think trying to rank them is a fool's errand, because there's just so many different outcomes for these
Mhm.
guys. Like, and most of them are new. Like, uh, except for Spencer Rattler and the guy that transferred from uh, NC State to Kentucky. Like, everyone else is basically a brand new guy. So, well, and
Yeah.
and of course, KJ Jefferson at Arkansas. He's had a pretty good career. But Connor, I know we didn't see it all the time last year, but you saw the flashes.
Mhm.
You saw him beat LSU, him throw for 340 in his first start. 8 touchdowns, no turnovers. He still has that talent that we saw from him in high school, and if things were to fall, you know, in a good way, he could be the best quarterback in the conference. He could
Yeah.
also be the eighth best quarterback in the conference. There's just I'm pretty confident he won't be the worst. I can say that with confidence, but you know, anywhere from the very top to middle of the pack, that's all kind of on the table. But
Mhm.
if you get top end quarterback play from Connor, obviously this season has a chance to be a really really good one.
Yeah, and I'm more optimistic for Connor than I am pessimistic. I think he'll
Oh,
be a,
same.
a great quarterback, but I think a lot of that, like, I think what last year really showed is the quarterback's only as good as the guys around him, right? Everybody knows that concept, but you got to have those receivers that can catch the ball. You got to have that run game really go into where you can do that, and you got to have some pass protection. I mean, he
Oh
he
yeah.
had so much that he was just running for his life, and so I think as you see all of those, because like you said, skill positions I think are very much improved. I think that that's going to be a really good area for us. I think the line's going to be improved, and so when you put those things together, even if you had a middle of the road quarterback, I think he's going to be improved to what we had last year, because he will have better skill positions, better line, and so if that's the case, I think you see the higher end of Connor's potential instead of the lower end, and so, um, but it's all speculation at this point, so we'll have to see, but
Yep.
I am confident. I do think that the team that we have, I think will be improved. I don't expect another 5-7 season, but I do think that um, I think we still have some question marks. I think we've earned the right as fans to have some question marks going into this season, and to not be 100 miles an hour right now, all excited about the season, and to be cautiously optimistic.
Yep. I just thought of something, but it's actually a really really good I guess teaser for a future Q&A. I'll have to write it down so I can
Remember it?
remember to bring it up when we have that. But basically, my wife asked me, why do I care so much? Basically, that was the the basic question that was posed, and we'll get into that in a
A,
Q&A
a
episode.
good Q&A, yeah.
But also, Tim Brewer asked, "How's our O line looking?" Well, get back to us in 2 weeks. I think
Yeah.
will be when the O line episode goes. We'll be live on that one. Um, I wish I could tell y'all we have a date that we're going to be every week, but I can't tell you that because still just too much travel going on with the summer. I'm actually going to a baseball game with Chase next week, and then Chase is leaving the United States to go across the pond. Um, and I'm not sure when I'm going to be back, so it's probably next Thursday. It could be Wednesday, but probably next Thursday.
It's going to be
For
sometime.
yeah,
So just
but come come hell
ring that little bell, and that way you get notifications when we go live.
come hell or high water, we are recording once a week from now until December. I can tell you that right now. But it may be solo sometimes if it has to be. We'll just have Hayden go live and just stream his thoughts.
I can tell you right now, I'm not going on solo. I'll get my mom on here before I do
There you
that.
go. There you go. All right. Well, thank y'all so much for your continued support of this program. Year 3, it's going to be our best year yet. Hopefully, A&M's best year yet since we started this venture. So,
Yeah.
thank you guys so much, and we will see you next week.
Hey, Will, before you cut off, I want to say one final piece here.
Yeah.
This is the first episode that we've done since the passing of Terry Price. He was a phenomenal coach. He was there the entire time that I was there. I interacted with him every single day. He always brought just a tremendous energy to the room. He would come over. One time, one of the managers was there was a really cool touchdown, and I think it was Speedy Noyle. I think he made a really awesome catch in practice and scored. And one of the defensive managers, he was like, oh, like excited how we would in the game. And Coach Price pulled all of the defensive managers over, and he said, y'all are defense managers. That doesn't happen. You only celebrate when the defense does well, never when the offense does well.
Yeah.
And he had a level of excitement that could never be matched. And he had the most wonderful family. Both of his kids were in the equipment room every single day, and they were so well behaved compared to some of the other kids that were running around. Man, they were good kids. And of course, they've really, of course, Devin and Alex both they've really made something for themselves. I'm very proud of them. But the loss of Terry Price is a terrible thing, and my heart goes out to his family. Like I said, a wonderful family. He was a wonderful man, and the world lost a great man, but Texas A&M definitely did. He was an alumni and a coach. I don't know if we've had a coach that has stuck around for that long before. We're sitting here talking about how great our D line was. Kudos to him. I mean, look at the people who came through that program because of him. So rest in peace, Coach Price. We'll miss you, and we'll thank y'all again for listening to our spiels on Texas A&M football, and we're looking forward to an exciting year 3.
Yeah. No, I couldn't have said it better myself. Like it was so apparent just from the outpouring from from anybody that worked with him, like from players, personnel, just people in the community. Like people could not speak highly enough of Terry Price, and he was a pillar of the program and of the community in College Station. And I said this about Mike Leach when he passed. It's a shame that Mike Leach, couldn't live out his days on a beach in Florida. It's a shame that Coach Price couldn't open up a barbecue place when he was done coaching football in College Station, because it would have been awesome. But our thoughts and prayers are with his family. It was a very very tragic sudden loss, but he was. It's lucky that A&M was able to experience Coach Price for as long as they could. So thank you guys so much for tagging along today. And like we said, once a week. Sometimes twice, maybe twice. We'll see. We'll keep you in the loop. But
Here
like
goes
Chase said,
Will biting off more than he can chew again.
hey, hit all the buttons. Hit the bell, hit the follow, hit all that. Subscribe to our email list. we do it all. But all right. Y'all have a great weekend. We'll see y'all next week.